Jerusalem is one of the holiest cities in Islam. It is where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ travelled to, then ascended from into the heavens during his journey of the Isra wal Mi'raj. Furthermore, it is the home to the Masjid Al-Aqsa, the third holiest site in Islam and the first qibla that the Ummah has ever had. What we've mentioned, amongst other things, makes Jerusalem indispensable to the Muslim Ummah, and hence its conquest a defining moment in Islamic history. In this video, we will look into the Ummah's first conquest of Jerusalem and the events that led up to this significant moment. But before we start, please remember to like, share and subscribe, as this would really help the channel, and to give us a comment in the comment section, as this would really boost us in the YouTube algorithm. Jazakallahu khairan. Before delving in, we must give a little context. During the period of revelation, the two great powers of the era had been the Persian Sassanid and the Roman Byzantine empires, and the two would go to war for a duration of 26 years, from 602 to 628 Common Era. This would be one of those wars where everyone was paying attention to. Even in Arabia, both the Muslims and the polytheists were following the conflict. Ibn Abbas would narrate, "The idolaters wanted the Persians to prevail over the Romans because they were idol worshippers, and the Muslims wanted the Romans to prevail over the Persians because they were people of the book." The war itself would turn out to be significant for many reasons. Amongst them are the following two. The first, for the very fact it is mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين.
Alif Lam Mim. The Romans have been defeated in a nearby land, yet following their defeat, they will triumph. The second is the impact that it would have on the region. In 614 Common Era, the Persian Sassanids would successfully take Jerusalem from the Byzantines. They would be aided by a significant number of Jews in the region, who chose to rebel against the Byzantines. Once Jerusalem was captured, a massacre would take place against the Christian population. The largest number killed would be at Mamilia Pool, west of Yafa Gate. One source claiming that the number killed are estimated to be around 4,500 to 24,500. Furthermore, it is alleged that the churches and Christian relics were destroyed once the city had fallen. An eyewitness would write, "Holy churches were burnt with fire. Others were demolished. Majestic altars fell prone. Sacred crosses were trampled underfoot. Life-giving icons were spat upon by the unclean." However, Jerusalem would only stay in the hands of the Persians for a decade and a half, for the Emperor Heraclius would win back Jerusalem for the Byzantines in 629 Common Era, 1 year after the Sassanid-Byzantine War had ended. According to the historian Walter K. Gee, Heraclius originally wanted to forgive the Jews of Jerusalem for their role in aiding the Persians. and even promised safety to a delegation of Jews he met in Tiberias. However, he was faced with severe backlash from the clergy when they learned of this, and he was forced to change his mind. When he arrived, he would commit a massacre on the Jewish population of Jerusalem, and decreed that no Jews were permitted to live within 3 miles of Jerusalem. However, it wasn't just the city of Jerusalem and those who lived in it who suffered. By the end of the conflict, both the Byzantine and Sassanid empires were exhausted and severely weakened, leaving them vulnerable for the emergence of a new power, the Rashidun Caliphate. Now, interestingly, Heraclius had already been wary from the threat posed by the Muslims, for the emperor claims to have had a vision which foretold his empire withering away at the hands of men who performed circumcision. Worried about this, he would inform his people, "I saw the leader of those who practice circumcision had appeared. Who are they who practice circumcision?" His people would respond, "Except the Jews, nobody practices circumcision, so you should not be afraid of them. Just issue orders to kill every Jew present in the country." However, before Heraclius would act, he would learn that the Arabs also performed circumcision, and as a result, he would become wary of the threat coming from the Muslims. The story doesn't stop here, however. Heraclius would engage in a discussion with Abu Sufyan when the latter arrived in Levant, and Heraclius would become convinced that the Prophet ﷺ was indeed a prophet, but would ultimately choose not to convert for fear that his followers would turn against him. For those who are interested, a link to show the full story, found in Sahih Bukhari, will be shared in the description to this video. Interestingly, this story is partially mentioned in the Christian source, the Chronicle of Fredegar, with the author citing but minor differences. Moving on, quite remarkably, approximately 1 year after the Sassanid-Byzantine War concluded, would the Muslims conclude their own feud with the polytheists of Quraysh. In 629 Common Era, the Muslims would take Mecca, and with the Quraysh now defeated and the Persians and the Romans weakened, the stage was now set for the Muslims to expand beyond the Arabian Peninsula. For the purpose of this video, we will focus on the conflicts with the Byzantines, as they were the holders of Jerusalem at the time. We've already discussed this in one of our recent videos, but here is a quick summary. The first major victory against the Romans came in 634 Common Era, during the First Battle of Ejnadain. According to one version, this followed with the Muslims' capture of Damascus in that very same year. However, the more spectacular victory came 2 years later at Yarmouk, when the Muslim army defeated a Roman army reportedly 3 times its size. The victories were spearheaded by the great military general Khalid Ibn Walid. During Yarmouk, one Roman general by the name of Jurjah was so astounded by the Muslims' victories that he would defect to the Muslim camp and ask the following question to Khalid. "O Khalid, tell me the truth, and do not lie to me, for the freeborn does not lie. And do not try to deceive me, for the noble-natured does not try to deceive one who is acting kindly by God. Did God send you down a sword from the heaven on your prophet, giving it to him so that you do not draw it against a people, but that you defeat them?" Khalid would of course respond, "No," to which Jurjah would reply, Then why are you named the Sword of God? Khalid Ibn Walid would brief Jurjah about the events of the Prophet ﷺ, how he earned his title, and of the religion of Islam. Jurjah would be impressed. Then he would convert to Islam himself. Back to the battlefield, victory at Yarmouk would prove to be decisive, as it essentially ended the Byzantine grip over Syria. This is something that even Emperor Heraclius appears to concede to, for he would later on famously say, "Farewell, Syria, I do not think we shall meet again." With the Roman Emperor now conceding defeat in Levant, it was only a matter of time before Jerusalem would fall. However, not everyone in the Byzantine army gave up just yet. One of which was the Byzantine general Artaban, who was gathering an army to face the Muslims. Artaban split his forces into 3 key regions, one in Ajnadain, which he himself commanded, a second in Ramallah, and a third at Jerusalem. When the Muslim caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an learnt of this, he ordered Amr ibn al-As to confront Artaban at Ajnadain. Meanwhile, he asked Muawiyah to confront the Byzantines at Sazira, and Abu Ayyub al-Maliki to confront the Byzantine army at Ramallah, to prevent any of those regions from aiding Artaban. Likewise, Amr ibn al-As sent some of his own forces to confront the Byzantines at Jerusalem to prevent them from aiding him. Amr ibn al-As would defeat Artaban in the Second Battle of Ajnadain. On this, At-Tabri compares it to Yarmouk, commenting the following on the battle: "And the 2 armies fought a heavy battle, like the Battle of Yarmouk, in which many were killed. After his defeat, Artaban would be able to flee from battle and somehow seek refuge in Jerusalem. The Muslim army would then march to the holy city and lay siege to it, but what happens next is disputed. According to one version, it had been Amr ibn al-As who led the siege. Artaban, who was now behind the city's walls, would write the following letter to Amr ibn al-As: "You are my friend and opposite number. The position you hold among your people is comparable to my position among mine. By God, you will not conquer any part of Palestine after Ajnadain. Go back and do not be deceived, lest you be defeated like those before you." However, Amr ibn al-As would respond to Artaban, essentially telling him to give it up. "I am," and here he is referring to himself, "the man destined to conquer this land." However, when Artaban learnt of what Amr ibn al-As had said, he would merely laugh, stating, "The name of the man destined to do it is Umar. It is written with 3 letters." According to this version, the Byzantines were aware that it was Umar who was destined to take Jerusalem. Artaban would spell this out to Amr ibn al-As. Quite literally, for those of you who did not understand what he meant, both of their first names are somewhat similar in Arabic. Amru spelled Ain, Mim, Ra, Waw, 4 letters, and Umar, Ain, Mim, Ra, 3 letters. When Amr ibn al-As learnt of this response, he sent the following letter to Umar ibn al-Khattab, stating, "I am conducting a difficult and fierce war, and a land that has been held and preserved for you. I desire your opinion." However, according to version 2, it had been Abu Ubaidah who led the siege. According to this version, eventually the Byzantines would accept defeat. However, the Patriarch of Jerusalem only agreed to its surrender if Umar RAA in person would come down and take Jerusalem. Either way, it seems that the Byzantines either knew that Umar was destined to take Jerusalem or that they wanted him to take it. Umar would leave Medina for Levant, with Ali left in charge of the affairs of Medina. According to Salim bin Abdullah, when Umar reached the Syrian town of Al-Jabiyah, a Jewish man would inform him, "O Commander of the Faithful, you will not return to your country before Allah has granted you victory over Jerusalem." And sure enough, a Byzantine envoy would arrive at Al-Jabiyah to meet Umar so that they could facilitate their surrender of Jerusalem. Umar would reportedly be impressed and later ask that very same Jew about the Dajjal. Wallahu a'lam. Back to Umar and the Byzantine envoy. After both parties reached an agreed settlement, Umar would write two letters, one addressed to the location of modern-day Ramallah and its governors, and the other to Jerusalem and its governors. Both letters had been nearly identical, with additional terms added to the letter addressed to the people of Jerusalem to meet the Patriarch of Jerusalem's demands. For the purpose of this video, we will read the letter addressed to Jerusalem. However, for the sake of analysis, this letter will be read in two parts. The first goes like this. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. This is the assurance of safety, which the servant of Allah, Umar, the Commander of the Faithful, has granted to the people of Jerusalem. He has given them an assurance of safety for themselves, for their property, their churches, their crosses, the sick and the healthy of the city, and for all the rituals that belong to their religion. Their churches will not be inhabited by Muslims and will not be destroyed. Neither they, nor the land on which they stand, nor their cross, nor their property will be damaged. They will not be forcibly converted. Here Umar guarantees the Byzantine safety and the Christians the right to worship without being forced to convert to Islam, which is a stark comparison to when the Persians took Jerusalem in 614 Common Era, and when the Byzantines won it back from the Jews and the Persians in 629 Common Era. For those who claim that this might simply be coming from Muslim apologists, it really isn't. The religious toleration provided by Umar is even confirmed by the chronicler William of Tyre, a man who lived during the Crusade era and in opposition towards the Ummah and Islam. Even Tyre concedes they allowed the conquered people, however, to restore their ruined churches, to have their own bishop, and to follow the Christian religion without restraint. However, this is not to say that the religious toleration is how we understand it today in the 21st century. Islam was not prescribed as simply another religion. Rather, it was officially promoted as being superior to any other religion. Furthermore, Christians were forbidden to preach to Muslims, and so forth. The second part of the letter goes like this. No Jew will live with them in Jerusalem. The people of Jerusalem must pay the poll tax, like the people of the other cities, and they must expel the Byzantines and the robbers. As for those who leave the city, their lives and their property will be safe until they reach their place of safety. And as for those who remain, they will be safe. They will have to pay the poll tax like the people of Jerusalem. Those of the people of Jerusalem who want to leave with the Byzantines take their property and abandon their churches and the crosses will be safe until they reach their place of safety. Those villagers who were in Jerusalem before the killing of so-and-so may remain in the city if they wish, but they must pay the poll tax like the people of Jerusalem. Those who wish may go with the Byzantines, and those who wish may return to their families. Nothing will be taken from them before their harvest is reaped. If they pay the poll tax according to their obligations, then the contents of this letter are under the covenant of Allah, are the responsibility of His Prophet, of the Caliphs, and of the faithful. First, let us address the elephant in the room here. As part of the surrender terms, Umar RAA kept to the Byzantines' policy of forbidding the Jews any residency in Jerusalem. This had been specifically requested by the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronius, likely because of the back and forth conflict that occurred between Jerusalem's Jews and Christians. However, we know that this would change sometime after. For example, there is an account that mentions the massacre of the Jews of Jerusalem during the advent of the First Crusade. Here, Ibn al-Qalanisi writes, "When the Crusaders took Jerusalem, the Jews assembled in a synagogue, and the Franks burnt it over their heads." Going back to the second part of the letter, Umar RAA guarantees the Christians safety in Jerusalem so long as they pay the jizya, and even gives them the option to leave with the Byzantines if they so much wished, along with their property, demonstrating his justice. Going back to the event itself, the signing of the letters were attested by Khalid Ibn Walid, Amr ibn al-As, Abdurrahman bin Auf, and Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. And once everything had been agreed upon, the Muslims began their march towards Jerusalem. Although the Christians in Levant were relatively content by what was offered, this was not shared by Artubun. The Byzantine general would leave Jerusalem to Egypt in the hope that he could reside there. However, when he learned that the Egyptians accepted the pact of Umar as well, he decided to confront the Muslims one last time before being killed in one of the summer's expeditions. When Umar arrived at Jerusalem to receive the keys to the city, the Byzantines, who were expecting the Muslim caliph to come wearing royal clothes, were shocked to see him arrive in his seemingly modest clothing and the mere camel he was riding. In volume 7 of his book, The Beginning and the End, Ibn Kathir narrates that the Byzantines tried to convince him to change his outfit, as well as his mount. The Patriarch reportedly informed Umar, "You are the king of the Arabs. Riding a camel is not appropriate in the land which you have just conquered. You need to wear different clothes and ride a horse, for this is greater in the eyes of the Romans." However, Umar would respond with the following: "We are a people whom Allah honored with Islam. We do not want a substitute other than Allah." Regardless, the Romans would still bring forth their own clothes for Umar to wear, and a horse for him to ride. However, Umar would stop them, stating, "Stop, stop. I never knew that people rode on Satan before this." By this, he was referring to the people's arrogance for the belief that this was necessary, and Umar would continue the journey riding his own camel. After this, the Byzantines would hand over the city without any further opposition. There is another famous story of Umar entering the church courtyard of the Holy Sepulchre and refusing to pray inside when the prayer had started, for fear that if he did, the Muslims might claim the church for themselves. However, I have recently learned that this story is disputed, and a link that disputes the story will be shared in the video description of this video. Wallahu a'lam. During the break of dawn, Umar radiallahu an would ask for the adhan, and he would pray at Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. In his first rak'ah, he would recite Surah Sa'd, and in the second, he would recite the beginning of Surah Bani Israel. In order to make sense of the situation, we need to clarify something, and here we turn to Ibn Taymiyyah, who says in his Majmu'ah al-Fatawat, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is the name of the entire mosque. Some people have started to use the name Al-Aqsa for the prayer place which was built by Umar ibn al-Khattab at the front. Essentially, the Masjid Al-Aqsa existed long before the Rasul ﷺ and the Sahaba. However, over time, the location in which Umar radiallahu anh had built for a place for the Muslims to pray in would mistakenly be referred to as Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa by itself. However, this is a common misconception. Umar radiallahu anh would also uncover parts of the Masjid Al-Aqsa which had been covered by rubbish that the Byzantines put there. Kneeling down himself, he would inform the others, "O people, do what I am doing." Afterwards, the region would be cleansed. Upon doing so, Ka'b al-Ahbar, a Muslim who converted from Judaism, would praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and inform others that these events were prophesied, but again, Allahu a'lam. And so the Islamic conquest of Jerusalem would be complete, although the exact year in which the Muslims took Jerusalem is disputed, sources varying from 636 Common Era to 638 Common Era. From then on, Jerusalem would remain in the hands of Sunni Islam until the Fatimids would take it in 970 Common Era. Sometime in the future, Salah ad-Din would win back Jerusalem from the Crusaders in 1187 Common Era, and in some ways mirrors the conquest of Umar radiallahu anh, choosing to spare the Christian population and the churches inside, but that's a video for another time. If you liked the video, please remember to give us a like, share and subscribe. While you're at it, why not check out some of the other videos we have on the channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.